was there one source for mankind? The interesting thing is that biologists believe that they've identified the original woman, and so they can't, I don't know if they've identified the original man, but it's clear that you can have the multiplicity of the various races coming from one couple. We are one species. The definition of a species is that we can interbreed and have the same type of children. They may have different coloring. They may have different structure of their skeleton, but they're basically the same being. And so my belief, yes, is that there was one couple who had different types of pigmentation within themselves, different type of skeletal possibilities, and that in the course of time certain groups developed and became part of they lived in a particular region and developed their own unique features, but that this was something that came from an original general mode type, like a stem cell kind of thing, and that there was one original source for that. It is clear that, for example, there are many different types of Jews. There are Yemenite Jews who are almost black. There are Moroccan Jews who are Mediterranean, brown, curly hair, and so on and so forth. There are Ashkenazic Jews, fair skins, and so on. So one could say that, well, there was interbreeding, but there was very little interbreeding. If you haven't know anything about the Jewish genetics, they've done studies on this, and we have remarkably maintained our DNA and our genetics over the fact that different people have different types of outward features does not reflect the basic unity of the Jewish people. And of course there are differences, and of course in the course of time there might have been converts or other factors that might have led to different distinctive features, but generally speaking we come from one source. The same thing is true with all of mankind, and go back even further. There was variations due to various circumstances. Different people had different experiences, and as a result they evolved differently, but they came from one source.
And the stories of Noah and Jonah, do you believe that these are real stories?
They seem so fantastic, right?
Yeah, or are they maybe just lessons in the Torah?
Okay. So the answer to you is that we believe them to be factual and that they actually took place. It's interesting that there have been people who have claimed to have seen the timbers of the boat. There's been a lot of speculation about that. The mount, the particular Mount Ararat is actually found in Turkey, and they've discovered supposedly a large structure that might have existed at the time, and they've discovered all different kinds of interesting things within the digs over there. And the size of the thing is very, very close to the size based on the Torah. So either someone built something a couple of thousand years ago that size just to fool everybody, or else it was the source of that. Now, the story of Jonah and the whale, first of all, it wasn't a whale, it was a fish. I have no there is no commentary that I know of that indicates that this is just a metaphor. There were those, for example, the story of Job, who believed that Job was a metaphor.
Right.
That's found in the Talmud. And then there are two opinions. One opinion says, well, then the Torah would not have identified the area where he was born and so on and so forth. The Torah would, or the prophets would not have done so. They would have restricted it so that we should understand that this was a metaphor. And there's another opinion that says it never happened. It was just a metaphor. But with Jonah, we don't have any such opinion. So we're left to the only option of believing that this was actually something that took place. How could it have taken place? They found in the 19th century a man who had been swallowed by a whale several weeks in that whale. They found the whale, opened the whale up, and the man was still alive. That happens to have been a recorded event in whaling. I saw the particular story. I don't always keep in categories. I had a friend who would categorize every interesting story, and I would have to try to find it for you. But this was something that was recorded, and the man's name was noted. This was not just a... So this is something that took place less than 200 years ago. So if that could happen 200 years ago, it could happen just as easily. So you say, well, why did it happen? There's a lesson, obviously. There's a remarkable lesson for the human being that under all circumstances we can survive somehow through our prayers to God. And that, yes, most of the time things look bleak. But in every bleak situation, people who have prayed and have had this connection to God, somehow or other, many of them were saved. I'll give you an example. There was a man by the name of Granatstein, Yechiel Granatstein, and he was in a ghetto that was going to be liquidated. He had hidden a machine gun because he had been part of the Polish army that had been disbanded. And he buried the machine gun, and then he was taken to this ghetto. The ghetto was to be liquidated, and as it was being liquidated, a voice told him, "Hide yourself. Hide yourself." And he didn't understand where the voice was coming from, but there was a voice, "Hide yourself." There was no place to hide. What he did was, in the stairway, there was a place where he could put himself, and he wouldn't be obvious. And the Germans went looking for him several times and just did not see him. He was open. It wasn't like it was a hole. It's like it was open, but it was just out of the way. But if you just looked up, you would see him. And he was there. And he heard this voice, "I will help you, hide yourself." And he waited. And he waited till nightfall. And he was able to then escape. He dug up his machine gun. And he survived the war as a partisan, in which he took out his vengeance on the Germans, many instances, and he died just, I think, last year or 2 years ago. He was about 90 years old at the time, and his children, he hardly would talk about himself and his children. There's a book about him, Rabbi Yechiel Granatstein, and he was a pious Jew, a Ger Chassid, a Hasidic Jew, and he survived where nobody else survived. And he said he heard this voice telling him, "Go, hide yourself, I'll protect you," something like that. And he was protected. He survived. He survived the war, the most difficult of circumstances. I mean, it's a book about it.